before you quit, before you make that decision to walk away from something that once meant something to you, you have to stop and ask yourself a brutally honest question. What is driving your desire to quit? Not the surface level excuse, not the story you tell your friends, or even the one you whisper to yourself in the dark. The real reason. Because if you don't get to the bottom of that, then what you're doing isn't clarity, it's escape. And escape is a poor substitute for transformation. Many people want to quit when the burden starts to feel heavy. But heaviness alone isn't a reason to stop. Struggle doesn't always mean you're on the wrong path. Sometimes it means you're finally on the right one. And it's demanding everything from you because it needs to in order to shape you into someone who can carry the weight of the life you're asking for. We live in a culture that rewards ease. That tells you if something's hard, it must be wrong. If it hurts, it must be toxic. But pain is a strange thing. It can either be a signal to leave or a signal to grow. And only deep introspection can tell you which it is. You can't afford to make a decision based purely on how you feel in a moment of weakness. Feelings are transient. Your future is not. Ask yourself, am I quitting because I've lost vision or because I've lost faith? Vision can fade in the fog of exhaustion, but that doesn't mean the mission is over. It just means you need rest. You may be in a valley right now, but valleys are not graves unless you choose to lie down and stay there. Dig deeper. Are you quitting because the world is resisting you or because you've started resisting yourself? That's a dangerous place to be, when your own self-talk becomes the enemy. When the voice inside your head convinces you that your limits are permanent, that your failures define you, that nothing's ever going to change. But here's the truth. You are not your current results. You are not the last mistake you made. You are not the pain you feel right now. You are what you decide to do next. And that decision needs to come from a place of truth, not fear. When you're burned out, every option looks like the wrong one. But you have to differentiate between being tired and being finished. Tired is human. Finished is a decision. And decisions made in exhaustion rarely lead to destiny. If the voice telling you to quit is the same voice that told you to start, if it's born of deep conviction, of alignment, of a quiet knowing that the time has come to pivot, then listen. But if it's rooted in fear, in frustration, in fatigue, then don't you dare let it make the call. That's not wisdom. That's surrender disguised as strategy. Before you quit, ask yourself, what's really driving you to the edge? Is it a lack of progress or a lack of patience? Is it rejection or a cry for recognition that hasn't been answered yet? Whatever it is, name it. Shine light on it. Because when you drag it into the open, you take away its power. And once you see it clearly for what it is, you'll either rise stronger with renewed purpose or you'll walk away with integrity, not regret. But never, ever let a moment of pain make the decision for you. Because greatness is often born right after the moment you almost gave up. Before you quit, there's something else you have to confront. Something uncomfortable but essential. You need to ask yourself, with unflinching honesty, have you truly given it everything you have? And I don't mean in the romanticized, half-hearted way we often like to believe. I mean, have you squeezed every last ounce of effort, every spark of creativity, every piece of your will into this thing? Or have you been dancing on the edge, holding back, waiting for something external to push you before you really commit? You see, we like to convince ourselves that we've tried everything, but most of the time we haven't. What we've done is tried until it got hard. We've tried until the path asked something more of us, something we weren't ready to give. And then we paused. We rationalized. we told ourselves, maybe this isn't meant to be. When in reality, we were just afraid of the cost of becoming who this path required us to be. It's much easier to say this isn't working than it is to say, I haven't gone all in. That's a brutal truth. It stings, but the truth always does when it hits close to home. And here's the deeper tragedy. Some people quit at the 40% mark. Others give up at 70%. The few reach 90% and still walk away, never knowing they were inches from breakthrough. Inches. But those inches demand everything you've got. They demand the version of you that refuses to leave the arena until the fight is over, not when it gets uncomfortable. Ask yourself, have you really stayed up the extra hours, studied the things you didn't understand, leaned into the difficult conversations, faced the fear that paralyzed you? Have you really pushed past your excuses, your laziness, your self-doubt? Because if you haven't, then how do you know it's time to quit? How do you know what could have been possible if you only pushed a little further? There's a version of you on the other side of perseverance that you haven't even met yet. And that version doesn't get born until your back is against the wall, until your heart is tired and your mind is screaming at you to stop. But you don't. That's the moment. That's when you cross into real growth, into real power, into ownership of your life. And it's not about perfection. You don't have to be flawless. You just have to be honest. If you've given everything, true everything, and the door still won't open, then you can walk away knowing you left nothing on the table. That's not quitting. That's wisdom. That's discipline. That's clarity born from effort. But if you're standing at the door, key in hand, but you never really tried to unlock it, don't you dare call that failure. That's abandonment. That's fear winning. And fear only wins if you hand it the crown. So before you walk away, take a hard look in the mirror and ask, did I really fight for this? Did I leave a part of myself in this process? Or did I try just enough to justify giving up so I could say it wasn't meant to be? Because the most painful truth is not that you failed. It's that you never really showed up. And nothing haunts a person more than the realization that they never found out who they could have become, simply because they never gave it everything they had. There's a point in every journey where the struggle becomes so relentless that you start to question everything. You wonder if you've made a mistake. If maybe, just maybe, this path was never yours to walk in the first place. But here's the thing. Struggle in itself isn't an indication of failure. The presence of difficulty doesn't automatically mean you're out of alignment. Sometimes it means you're exactly where you need to be. The real challenge is learning to discern. Is this struggle a sign of growth, or is it a sign that you're misaligned with your purpose? Because growth and misalignment can look incredibly similar on the surface. Both are uncomfortable. Both can drain you. Both can leave you questioning your worth. But they're fueled by different forces. Growth pains are the aches of expansion, the stretching of your mind, your skills, your soul into territory you've never explored. Misalignment, on the other hand, is the quiet decay of the self, the erosion that happens when you're investing your energy into something that doesn't resonate with your deeper values, your identity, your calling. So how do you tell the difference? You stop, you get silent, and you listen. Not to the noise, not to your fear, but to that still, small voice inside that knows. You ask yourself, is this resistance making me stronger, or is it slowly breaking me down? Is this suffering pushing me to become more capable, more grounded, more resilient? Or is it diminishing me, stripping away my joy, my sense of self, my hope? Because sometimes the mountain in front of you isn't there to stop you, it's there to show you what you're made of. But other times it's there because you climbed the wrong peak. And if you're too proud, too stubborn, or too afraid to admit that, you'll spend your life chasing someone else's version of success while losing your own. It takes courage to walk away from something that's not aligned. But it takes just as much courage to stay when the only thing pushing you to quit is discomfort, not misdirection. There's a difference between being in pain because you're evolving and being in pain because you're shrinking into a life that was never meant for you. And this is where honesty becomes your lifeline. You can't afford to lie to yourself here. You have to get clear on your value. What do you stand for? What kind of life are you building? What kind of person are you becoming in this process? If the struggle is refining you, sharpening your character, awakening a deeper level of grit, you hold the line. You stay in the fire, because that fire is forging something inside of you that comfort never could. But if the struggle is erasing you, if you're compromising your integrity, if you're burying your voice, if you feel like you're becoming less of who you are, then that's not growth. That's a warning. And the bravest thing you can do in that moment is not to endure, it's to pivot. To say, this is not my path, and to walk away, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. So when the struggle shows up, and it will, don't just react, reflect, question, seek the truth beneath the pain. Because the answer you find will either ignite your purpose or redirect your path. And both are victories if you're willing to listen closely enough to tell the difference. There's a question that carries more weight than most people realize. A question that very few are willing to sit with for long because it demands more than logic. It requires vision. It requires humility. It requires that you confront the long-term consequences of your short-term emotions. And it's this: what would your future self say about this decision you're about to make? Imagine yourself 5 years from now, at the idealized version you picture when you daydream, but the real you, the one who had to live through the choices you're making today. What would that version of you say if they were sitting in the room right now watching you wrestle with the idea of quitting? Would they thank you for finally releasing what no longer served you? Or would they stare back at you in quiet disappointment, knowing you pulled the plug before the miracle happened? We live in a culture obsessed with instant gratification. Everything is fast, immediate, convenient. And that's a dangerous environment for long-term thinking, because anything that takes time, anything that involves struggle, growth, sacrifice, feels wrong by comparison. We've been conditioned to believe that if it doesn't come easy, it's not meant for us. But that's not truth. That's seduction. That's weakness disguised as wisdom. When you're about to quit, your current emotions become louder than your values. They hijack your judgment. Pain speaks with urgency. Fatigue convinces you that you've done enough. Frustration demands an exit. And in that storm, it's easy to believe you're making a rational decision, when what you're really doing is making a permanent choice based on a temporary emotion. That's why the future version of yourself matters, because that version isn't clouded by today's exhaustion. That version can see the entire arc, the sacrifice, the silence, the slow progress, and understand what it all meant. That version knows if the struggle you're in right now was the crucible that formed you or the opportunity you abandoned. So ask yourself, what would my future self wish I'd done in this moment? Would they urge me to stay the course just a little longer, to endure the storm because the sky was about to clear? Or would they be proud that I had the strength to pivot when I realized the cost of staying outweighed the reward? This isn't about guilt. It's not about beating yourself up. It's about wisdom, because regret doesn't show up in loud, dramatic ways. It creeps in slowly. It shows up in conversations where you say, I almost, or I used to, or I could have been. It lingers in your quiet moments when no one's watching. And the only thing you can hear is your own conscience whispering, you gave up too soon. And make no mistake, that whisper doesn't fade with time. It grows. Because the life you could have lived doesn't go away. It becomes a ghost that follows you, reminding you of the gap between who you are and who you were meant to become. But the beautiful part of all this, the empowering part, is that the decision is still in your hands. You can stop right now and choose differently. You can listen to the voice of the future rather than the panic of the present. You can ask not what feels easiest, but what leads to the deepest fulfillment. You can choose growth. You can choose purpose. You can choose the path that your future self would look back on and say, that was the moment everything changed, because you didn't quit. Your future is shaped not by what happens to you, but by how you respond when it gets hard. So before you walk away, sit with the one person who's watched the entire story unfold, your future self, and ask if the ending you're writing is one they'll be proud to read. There's a subtle distinction that makes all the difference when you're thinking about quitting, one that most people never stop to examine. It's not just about whether or not you want to walk away. It's about why. And more importantly, it's about what you're walking away from. So here's the hard question. Are you quitting this, or are you just escaping responsibility? Because let's be honest, quitting often masquerades as clarity. You convince yourself that you're being logical, that you're protecting your peace, that you've outgrown the situation. And maybe that's true, but sometimes it's not growth calling you to move on, it's avoidance. It's fear. It's the unwillingness to face the weight of what it actually takes to carry something through to completion. Responsibility is a burden. It's supposed to be. It means being accountable for outcomes, for effort, for integrity. It means showing up even when you don't feel like it. It means holding a standard when no one's watching. And that kind of responsibility, real, mature, soul-shaping responsibility, is something many people aren't willing to carry. So instead, they rebrand their reluctance. They call it boundaries. They call it intuition. They call it letting go. But in truth, they're running, not from the task, but from the person they would need to become to see it through. And that's the core of this point. Are you stepping away from something because it's no longer aligned with who you are? Or are you retreating because the pressure is revealing parts of yourself you don't want to confront? Because responsibility has a way of dragging our shadows into the light. It exposes our procrastination, our excuses, our self-doubt, our lack of preparation. And when those things surface, it's easier to walk away than to face them, own them, and grow through them. But here's the problem. You can't outrun responsibility. You might change jobs. You might leave the relationship. You might abandon the project. But if you haven't done the internal work, those same patterns, those same weaknesses will follow you wherever you go. They'll just show up in new clothes under a different name. Because the issue was never the environment. It was your refusal to rise to what it demanded of you. This is why some people live their whole lives in cycles. They start something with excitement, they hit resistance, and then they quit. And every time they walk away, they think they're choosing freedom. But what they're really doing is shrinking, slowly, quietly, until they become a shell of the person they were meant to be. Not because they didn't have the talent, but because they didn't have the character to see things through. Responsibility is heavy, yes, but it's also sacred. It's the path to meaning. It's the forge where your potential becomes reality. And if you avoid it, you'll never know what you're truly capable of. You'll never discover the strength that only emerges when you stay in the fight, not because it's easy, but because it's right, because it's yours. So when you're standing at that edge, when the thought of quitting starts to feel like a relief, stop and ask yourself, am I really done, or am I just tired of being held accountable? Am I truly finished with this path? Or am I just unwilling to carry the responsibility it demands? That question might be the most important one you ever ask, because the decision to quit or to continue isn't just about what happens next. It's about who you become in the process. And sometimes the only thing standing between who you are and who you were destined to be is the responsibility you're trying to avoid. Before you make the decision to quit, before you make that final choice, there's one question you must ask, one that can't be ignored no matter how strong the pull to walk away might be. Have you asked God? Have you aligned yourself with a higher purpose? It's a question that requires humility, faith, and a willingness to listen, not just to your own desires, but to the deeper calling that might be stirring beneath the surface. And here's the truth, that we live in a world that pushes us to rely on our own understanding, to trust only in what we can see, touch, and measure. But life is much more than just the physical realm, and the deepest wisdom often comes from places we can't quantify. We can plan, we can strategize, we can fight through adversity, but unless we take the time to step back, to listen for something greater than our own voice, we risk walking down paths that aren't meant for us, or worse, abandoning the very path that we were called to walk. When you're in the midst of struggle, when the weight of the world feels unbearable and the pressure to quit seems overwhelming, it's easy to think that you have all the answers. But do you? Are you truly seeing the situation with clarity, or are you looking through the lens of fear, doubt, and frustration? Have you taken the time to humble yourself and ask for guidance from a higher source? Whether that's God, the universe, or whatever spiritual grounding you trust. There's a power in surrender. It's not a surrender of weakness, but a surrender of control. When you surrender to a higher purpose, you're saying, I don't have all the answers. I'm willing to accept that I may not fully understand why this struggle exists, but I trust that there's a greater reason for it. And that trust can give you the strength to continue when your own will has run dry, when you're tempted to quit, when the fight seems pointless. God doesn't always make his plans clear immediately. Sometimes the journey is long and difficult, and you may feel lost, confused, or isolated. But in those moments, if you listen carefully, you'll hear a whisper, a gentle reminder that there's more to this story than what you can see right now. Sometimes the struggle isn't a sign that you should quit, it's a sign that you're exactly where you're meant to be, even if it doesn't make sense in the moment. And often that's the hardest part, trusting that what feels like a dead end may actually be a turning point you can't yet understand. This is where faith enters the equation. Faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting that there is meaning in the struggle, even when it doesn't feel like it. It's about recognizing that your life, your mission, and your challenges are part of something much greater than yourself. If you've truly aligned with a higher purpose, if you've truly asked for guidance, then the decision to quit should never be made in haste. It should be made with clarity, with peace in your heart, and with a sense that you've been led to this moment for a reason. And that doesn't mean every challenge is a sign that you should push forward. Sometimes God's purpose for you might be to pivot, to change direction, to step into a new role, or to let go of something that no longer serves you. But that decision should be made with the understanding that you've sought wisdom beyond your own understanding. That you've asked, you've listened, and you've aligned your heart with something greater than personal ambition or fleeting desires. If you've asked God, if you've aligned yourself with a higher purpose, then you can walk away knowing that whatever decision you make is the right one for your soul, not just your circumstances. Whether you stay or whether you go, your path is clearer because you've entrusted it to something greater than yourself. So before you quit, take a moment and reflect. Have you sought higher guidance? Have you aligned with your purpose? If you haven't, then maybe the answer you're looking for isn't found in quitting, but in seeking deeper wisdom. Because when you're truly aligned, when you've listened for that deeper truth, you'll find the courage to either continue with renewed purpose or walk away knowing it's the right time to turn the page. And that decision, made from a place of alignment, will always be the right one for you. As we wrap up, I want you to take a moment and reflect on everything we've discussed. Life is filled with choices, each one holding the potential to define who we are and who we will become. But not all decisions are clear. Not all paths are easy. And the hardest of all may be the decision to keep going when everything inside of you tells you to stop. But before you make that choice, ask yourself the tough questions. Have you really given everything you have? Is the struggle you're facing a sign of growth, or are you simply misaligned? What would your future self say about this decision? Are you quitting because it's right, or are you just escaping the responsibility that comes with the challenge? And perhaps most importantly, have you asked God or aligned yourself with a higher purpose to guide your steps? These questions are the foundation of clarity. They are the compass that can guide you through moments of doubt, through moments when the road seems too long, the journey too hard. They are the tools that help you discern whether you're walking the path that's meant for you or simply running from something that asks more of you than you're willing to give. Understand this, quitting is not inherently bad. Sometimes it's the wise choice. But the decision to quit should never come from fear, from avoidance, or from a place of shallow thinking. The choice should come from a place of deep reflection, a place where you've asked the hard questions and sought guidance from something greater than yourself. If you can stand in the face of difficulty and still choose to move forward, whether in the face of failure or in the unknown, then you will emerge stronger, wiser, and more capable than ever before. But if you can step away knowing you've done everything you could, then that too is victory. It's about integrity, it's about alignment, and it's about making decisions that honor your growth and your purpose. So before you make your decision, pause, reflect, ask the hard questions, because when you align with the deeper truths, when you step into your purpose with courage, you will find the strength to carry on, or the wisdom to know when it's time to let go. Either way, you will walk forward with clarity, with power, and with a heart that knows it's done what was needed. And that is what will lead you to the life you were always meant to live.